Washington and Adams administrations as Secretary of State in Washington's first administration, 1794. Jefferson revived a proposal he had originated as a member of Congress in 1783 to establish reciprocal trade agreements with continental European nations and, in the face of British restrictions on American commerce, to deny such benefits to the British. The proposal died in Congress. His hope for release and even-handed American approach to Britain and France evaporated when the French envoy Edmund Janet appealed to the public for a military alliance with revolutionary France, and indiscretion that made Washington decide to repudiate the Franco-American Alliance of 1778. After leaving office, Jefferson was disturbed by the administration's increasing friendliness to Great Britain and by other policies promoted by Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton in 1796. He reluctantly allowed his name to be put forward as a candidate for the presidency by the opposition Republican Party. He received the second largest number of votes among four candidates, and therefore, according to the electoral system then in use, became vice president under the Federalist President John Adams in 1797. During his term in that office, he watched it with growing indignation as the Federalists capitalized on anti-French, feeling to create a standing army under the control of his enemy, Alexander Hamilton, and to pass the Alien Acts, restricting the liberty of supposedly pro-Republican foreigners, and the Sedition Act, which allowed the prosecutions of anyone who printed false statements critical of government officials, and resolutions drafted for the Virginia and Kentucky legislatures. Jefferson and James Madison denounced the constitutionality of these laws and assigned it to the states the role of bulwark against infringements on individual liberties. Jefferson as president in the elections of 1800. Jefferson and his fellow Republican Aaron Burr received an equal number of electorate votes, thus creating a tie and throwing the presidential elections into the House of Representatives. After 36 ballots, the House declared Jefferson elected. The Constitution was then amended to require a single electorate vote for president and vice president, as had Adams before him. Jefferson faced opposition from non-compromising factions within his own party, as well as from the Federalists. He steered a steady course between these two extremes, appointing some qualified Federalists to office and refusing a wholesale purge of office holders inherited from the Adams administration. He supported a repeal of the Judiciary Act of 1801, which had created a costly tide of federal appeals courts and will have encouraged appeals from the state courts. But he opposed any assault on the independence of the Federalist-dominated judiciary. Jefferson's three appointments to the Supreme Court, made between 1804 and 1807, were all strong nationalists and upholders of judicial independence. During his first term, his lifelong interest in the West and in American-French relations prompted his major presidential achievement, the purchase from France of Louisiana, all the western land drained by the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, and the organizations of a scientific expedition by William Clark and Meriwether Lewis to explore this territory. Foreign policy during his second term was, however, a disaster, seeking to force the British to respect United States neutrality on the high seas during the Napoleonic Wars. He pursued Congress in 1807 to embargo all trade with Britain, a move that failed to elicit any concessions devastated the nation's economy for a generation, and a line in New England, which lived by foreign trade. Retirement. After leaving office in 1809, he retired to Monticello, where he lived until his death on July 4, 1826. Corresponded with John Adams about the great issues of revolution and constitutionalism, trying to preserve his declining state for his daughters instead of his creditors, and brooding over the beneficial effects of slavery. He was unwilling, for financial reasons, to free his own slaves, and he disagreed with abolitionist friends who held that blacks were equal to whites. His paradoxical beliefs in human dignity and in racial inferiority typify the dilemma of the country he had helped to create. George Washington was found on a bed full of parasites next to Alexander Hamilton, John Adams correspondent to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. He persists about the great issues of revolution and constitutionalism, exposing the darkness that Washington practiced, Freemason, free religious practice, free trade deals with Britain and France, and by other policy promoted by Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton. General Dictator George Washington and Alexander Hamilton, they decided to get rid of Thomas Jefferson by galloping to his hometown Monticello. Thomas Jefferson, he declared, "Give me freedom or give me death," on July 4, 1826. This is George Washington next to Alexander Hamilton. My dear friend and lover, you ready? Yes, sir. I want to kill that bastard. Few days later, the threat of freedom was real. Thomas Jefferson, he declared, "Give me freedom or give me death," on July 4, 1826. This is George Washington. The duet and the countdown is taking place right now.